Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about taking your project financials to the next level with Deltek Vantagepoint. Before we dive in, there are a couple housekeeping items that I'd like to note. For the best webinar experience, please use Google Chrome or Firefox. The audio is going to be streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in. Make sure that your volume is turned up. You're going to be able to download the presentation slides and additional resources in the resources widget on your screen. All widgets can be resized to fit your computer screen. An on-demand recording is going to be emailed to you within 24 hours after the webinar ends. And of course, if you have any questions throughout the webinar today, please type them into the Q&A box. We will answer as many of those as we can, and we'll also take some live questions at the end. So today we're going to be talking about taking your project financials to the next level with Deltek Vantagepoint. Before I pass things off to Paul for the product demonstration, I do want to highlight a few things. So within the A&E industry, we are finding that companies are facing an increase in their competition, lots of shifting expectations from their clients, additional pricing pressure along with tighter margins, resource constraints, as well as disparate teams and systems. What this is leading to is increased employee turnover, decreases in utilization rates. Projects, almost 35% of projects are behind schedule. Our operating profit is hovering right around 15.8%, and that average collection period is north of 70 days. So throughout the demonstration today, Paul's going to highlight within Deltek Vantagepoint how the system works and how it will help address some of these challenges that you may all be facing today. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Paul.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, my name is Paul Flaherty. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Deltek Vantagepoint. Vantagepoint itself is a dual ledger system, both a project ledger and an accounting or general ledger system in one. As part of this webinar, we're going to go ahead and focus on several key areas around the accounting and financial management piece. In particular, one-click time cards, the ability to render time cards in various mediums, meaning mobile devices like your iPhone or Android device, on a tablet, be it an iPad or a Windows Surface tablet, Mac or PC. Because Vantagepoint is browser agnostic and platform agnostic, literally anywhere you find yourself in the world with a Wi-Fi or cell connection, you're going to be able to access the system, enter your timesheet, generate invoices, review and approve them. Really, virtually any function that you have access to via security within Vantagepoint, you're going to be able to render in those various devices at those different times. And because of that, you're going to be able to get paid faster as part of that connectivity and the ability on the move, on the go, to see those pertinent items related to managing projects. For instance, getting invoices, client invoices approved faster. Your ability to keep tabs on your project performance, budget to actual, as an example. And the ability also to review and approve time cards, not just entering time cards remotely, but as a supervisor, your ability to go ahead and see those, review, approve, or certainly reject if needed, and continue that throughput to get that time posted to go ahead and update your project financials, your general ledger, billing system where applicable, and to show those time entries as actuals against your budget. So why Vantagepoint? Vantagepoint is purpose-built for project-based businesses. The majority of how you derive your revenue is through labor, through time cards, and Vantagepoint is for you. It's an intuitive user experience. We're going to see that in just a moment. But thinking back to the fact that it is web-based, it is browser agnostic, platform agnostic, gives you the freedom to access the system from the device of your choice, from the browser of your choice. It comes from a strong foundation. Vantagepoint is the upgrade path to a tried and true product called Deltek Vision. Deltek Vision has been around for probably in the range of 18 or so years. Vision itself comes from a product called Deltek Advantage, which dates back to the 90s. So it's a strong foundation, it's a strong backbone, tried and true, process-based, oriented around projects. But that fully integrated solution, we're just looking at a piece of that in the webinar today. Vantagepoint comes with an integrated CRM, an integrated planning module. I mentioned the general ledger, billing, time cards, expense reports, all within a single system to really help you combine and consolidate those key process areas, and potentially based on how you currently operate, multiple systems. Absolutely mobile friendly. We touched on that just a little bit ago with some of those different avenues and paths you can take to access the system. As we move into Vantagepoint, just a few quick housekeeping items. Vantagepoint is browser agnostic, platform agnostic, which means you can run this in any browser of your choice. I'm running this in Firefox. You can run this in Chrome, Safari on an iPad, on a Windows Surface tablet, on a Mac, on a PC, literally anywhere you find yourself in the world with a Wi-Fi or cell connection, you're gonna be able to access the system. Of note, I'm also in as a system admin, so there's several menu items here that may or may not be applicable to you and your role. The system, being role-based, has the ability to control what access points or data menu items each role has configured. So the example here would certainly be a system admin, and then compare that to a time and expense only user where they only have access to those couple, three things, because that's their responsibility or role within the organization. It's very fluid in terms of what those roles are as it relates to how you operate. From a configuration standpoint, upon login, the system will authenticate that role and that user, and then display only the necessary components on the left-hand side as an example, based again on that particular login. With the housekeeping items out of the way, let's go ahead and start to tackle the agenda. We're going to look at tracking project financials in real time, talk about how this system will help with accurate data capture through electronic timesheets and expense reports. We're going to show you visibility into project financials, which allows you to manage profitability among other key performance indicators or KPIs. Certainly touch on faster invoicing and understanding the idea of payment status as it relates to that process as well. I'm going to go ahead and open here with dashboards from the navigation window. We're here under My Stuff, Dashboards. You see a composite here on the left-hand side, which has a similar role-based type component as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, related to roles on security within Vantagepoint. It's not uncommon to create different dashboards. You can see some of those listed there: CRM, pipeline review, down through some project manager-based ones, billing, owner, general ledger. We're three up from the bottom under My Project Plans. When you're thinking about managing projects, when you think about project financials, the notion of budget to actual and being able to understand where you are at any given time on a project based on your spend, i.e. burn rate, the passage of time, being able to translate that quickly and easily into a dashboard. So when a project manager or supervisor or anyone else organizationally that has interest and access to the projects wants to go ahead and understand where that job is, what it's forecasting out to be, something like the project plan summary that you see here, with the red line being the contract value, moving across all those different projects. The black portion down the bottom is what has been spent to date. The blue portion, the ETC or estimate to complete, is the system-generated formula that outlines or articulates, based on your burn rate, how much more runway you need, and then what you're going to look like at the end of the runway. And when you compare that then to the red dot for that contract for each of these respective projects, what this tells you is that most of your projects on this dashboard are in pretty good shape, but there are a few that are trending in an area where that red dot is certainly right in the middle, or at least part of that blue ETC, which indicates that as this job is trending, you're going to come in over budget. Some of these projects certainly have enough runway left to make changes, course corrections. That's going to allow you to maybe bring in lower cost resources or maybe secure a change order. And then there are several other projects where you can clearly see that they are trending well below that particular red dot and are going to come in very profitable. Now, analytically, you can see that measured there in the graphic up above. Some PMs or some individuals certainly like the numeric table grid type component, which you absolutely can show here as well. We're also highlighting conditional formatting. On the left-hand side there, you can see the different projects in the same way you can see them above graphically. And then the total budget or fee, what you've incurred, JTD or job to date as we move left to right. That same ETC or estimate to complete. And then when you essentially take your job to date and your ETC, add those two together, you get what's known as an EAC or an estimate at. So that estimate at complete would be that end of the runway type discussion. So then when you take your fee and subtract it from that EAC, you always hope to be positive in terms of what that net value is. In the examples where it is coming out negative, we're showing that using conditional formatting, which is native to Vantagepoint. Nothing that we're showing here is custom in any way, shape, or form. So that ability to go ahead and have conditional formatting. Some PMs prefer the stoplight approach, red, yellow, green. We're just highlighting in red the negatives, but you absolutely could put in yellow maybe anything from 0 to 7, 10% profitable, and then maybe anything north of 10 shows as green. Let's take a look at just a few more dashboards here when we're talking about project financial measurements. On this particular dashboard, the project manager with accounts receivable, that top dashboard is what we call a wave chart, in that you can see several of those wave-looking like measurements across, in this case, unbilled, billed, and AR. You could bring in other variables here, total revenue, total billed, profit, things of that nature, and layer them over based on, in this case, projects. There are, again, other variables that you could show there, clients or organizations as an example. But in looking at this particular dash part, you can clearly see that the Capitol Hill expansion project has unbilled of about 1.26 million. It has a much lower AR and billed amount. AR amount is about 93, and the billing amount is about 143,000. This clearly indicates that there's an issue with this project, something that's preventing you from billing that exceedingly large unbilled number. And that unbilled definition would be transactions in the billing system that are awaiting invoicing. Like many of you know, the longer unbilled sits out there and ages, the less likely it is you're going to be able to bill it, and likely have to take a write down or some type of additional consideration around those charges until they can be released for billing. One other dashboard here we're going to take a quick look at would be something in line with a billing review. This starts to lend itself maybe more on the accounting side of these discussions, but in terms of invoicing, being able to determine and measure how quickly you're turning over your outstanding unbilled transactions or your lump sum type projects, being able to get a sense of your trends across billed and unbilled, or looking at billing and AR are certainly important as it relates to those top two graphs, but really more down here in this middle table grid gives you a sense of some of those numerics around the unbilled values for labor, consultants, expenses, where the particular project is in terms of draft invoice status, what the invoice total is, when's the last time you've invoiced, and then moving down into a similar table grid would give you a sense more related to a particular draft invoicing session, understanding the totals for that particular invoice, again, across what your budget is, what you've billed, what you have remaining. It's almost like a billing budget composite there in conjunction with certainly your invoicing throughput, and being able to then easily measure and accurately understand how quickly you're turning over invoices in comparison to when and what was billed previously. As we move away from the dashboard, I want to get into where a lot of that data comes from, data for billing or the data that was populating certainly the spent values on the office earnings report. They're going to be predicated on different entry points or entry areas like timesheets, expense reports, accounts payable. We're going to focus largely on time entry in this particular example. And I wanted to then transition to the mobile apps that are part of the Vantagepoint suite. And by part of, what I mean by that is it's part of the same license. It's a free download on the App Store or Google Play. We support iOS and Android-based devices. And as mentioned, you can certainly do timesheets and expense reports. You can also do time and expense approvals from the handheld device. And being able to enter in your time, being able to see the different time periods. In this case, I'm semi-monthly. You might be weekly or bi-weekly. That's all configured based on whatever your needs are. But it gives your employees an additional level of mobility. Like with Vantagepoint, all you need is a cell or Wi-Fi connection with your phone as well to be able to access your timesheets and expense reports wherever you find yourself literally in the world. You do have the ability to copy previous timesheets. You have the ability to have saved favorites. And one of the areas we'll focus on in Vantagepoint as well is the ability to copy in your project assignments. These come from planning. We're not going to spend really any time talking about the planning process, project planning, resource allocation, but the benefit, among many, is that in Vantagepoint, that flows through to your timesheets. So your employees don't have to try to guess which projects they're supposed to be working on, how much time they should be spending on these various projects. You have the ability to bring those projects in quickly and easily, or you certainly could search for projects based on name or number. In an example like this, where based on your access to those different types of projects, based on planning, you can go ahead and pull some of that data in as well. So I'm going to bring us back into Vantagepoint now to talk about the same timesheet entry process that we just looked at on the handheld device. You can see the same couple projects listed here as well. And it gives you that ability to, let's say, start it on your phone and finish it here in Vantagepoint, or vice versa, or any combination thereof. It's the same database. It's the same license as I mentioned. You have that same option to copy from planning and bring in those same types of projects. These projects could also automatically load every time the employee opens their timesheet. That's a configuration setting. Otherwise, alternatively, like we're showing here, you could simply just select one of these projects and copy it down to your timesheet, and then go ahead and enter in your time and expense. If you're overtime or you have overtime considerations, you can surface two overtime buckets. We'll call them overtime 1 and overtime 2. Likely we find that comparable to time and a half or double time. In certain geographies, based on the number of hours you work in a day, you qualify for double time, let's say after 12 hours or something to that effect. You can type your comments in. And thinking back to those mobile devices, you can absolutely use the talk to text features. I'm sure many of you do now when you're texting or using Siri or other types of automated platforms in those phones to go ahead and use that natural language. You can use those same microphone type features here on your mobile devices to talk in things like your comments. You're going to go ahead and enter in your time across the entirety of your timesheet. So if you're weekly, you would only see that weekly selection. You're going to go ahead and again, just simply key in those hours, key in the overtime hours. You're going to go through a save process and submit. Like many organizations, it behooves you if your employees can enter your time or enter their time, on a fairly regular basis and save it versus waiting till, let's say, Monday at 11:59 when they're due at noon. You can leverage the ability to see unposted actuals with your posted time, with all the previous work that's been done, which really, if you have a job that you're managing on the edge, right there on budget, it gives you an additional insight into those unposted actual hours. And then again, if you need to make any changes, since those timesheets aren't posted, you have the ability to have those types of conversations around limiting any additional hours coming into this project in conjunction or in consideration with the ones that are already there. Time is then submitted, and the submit process allows for a multi-level approval. In thinking about project financials and managing that process, having a robust approval process can keep erroneous charges from entering the system in the first place. Gives you multiple sets of eyes that have the ability to approve or reject the timesheet so that the corrections can be made up front versus, let's say, transfers in billing or other types of labor adjustments that would need to happen because the approval process is single level, like it is in some other systems, or organizationally, you want to get to multi-level, but you're not entirely sure what individuals, i.e. how many levels you want. Our consulting group can certainly help you with that conversation and help you set that up so that it seamlessly flows through the different levels upon approval, sends out notifications to indicate that timesheets are awaiting the different approvers in their part of the process. If you were to reject it, could send the notification back to the employee. These notifications can also render via email. We know you're not always in the Vantagepoint system, so having the ability to get that information outside of just what you see here on the screen is certainly valuable to make sure people then re-enter the system and complete those various tasks, in particular, again, the timesheet piece or expense piece among the other areas or items that you see in this list. Really quickly here, another option that's available in Vantagepoint is the ability to do timesheets via calendar. In the same way that we pulled in the assignments from the planning piece, you can see those same planned projects. You have the ability then to drag those projects over onto a particular day of the week, and it'll surface a timesheet entry. That timesheet entry, much like what we saw in the actual timesheet itself, is going to allow you to enter in a comment. It's going to allow for regular and overtime hours, but it's another medium, another mechanism that your employees have as an option beyond, again, the handheld mobile, the Vantagepoint timesheet that we essentially just left, and that ability to do it here in your calendar as well. Let's start to transition out of calendar view. Let's take a quick look at the approval center. You saw a little bit of this on the mobile app where you had the ability to go ahead and review and approve timesheets and expense reports from there. In a similar way, you have the ability to see that here and go through that review and approval process. So as we noted, part of the financial management piece is accurate timesheets, being able to review those in a timely manner and approve them, get them into the system, and go ahead and get those posted. So you can then support processes like billing, like project reporting, and then even on through to the general ledger. So just a quick look here at the approval center. You're going to see all of the employees that you're responsible for. Noting that multi-level approval process, you might be a project manager who has access to just timesheet line items. You wouldn't see the entire timesheet. You would just see the particular projects that you own and all of the charges coming in on a daily basis from those various employees. This is more of a supervisory view or maybe something that someone in accounting sees, but it can be tiered, it can be multi-level to make sure that you have as many eyes on this as needed, to make sure they're as accurate as possible before they're approved and posted, minimizing work on the backside, the back end, if you will, in terms of administrative functions like in billing transfers. But again, getting this data, time, expense into the system and then moving into something like invoicing, which we're going to talk about right now. As we look at the invoice process as a whole, typically invoices are generated by accounting in either batch mode. So you can see batch billing there in the navigation. Let me just highlight it here really quickly, which would be multiple invoices in one shot, typically for a group of PMs or maybe a group of clients, however you want to organize it. High-performing firms are constantly invoicing. They typically invoice on a weekly basis. So week 1 might be me as a project manager. Week 2 might be project manager Joe Smith, right? Week 3, Debbie Allen, whatever those different groupings are, or it could be by client, but you're constantly invoicing, you're constantly getting cash back in through cash receipts as it relates to that, again, constant invoice process. Interactive billing would be something more akin to one at a time type project scenario. This is something where when you have reviews done by PMs and he or she, let's say, rejects an invoice, you need to make some changes as a biller. Interactive billing would be the place where that type of change would occur. Once those drafts are generated, there's a few places where PMs have the ability to see draft invoices. If we head back to Project Hub, let's go ahead and do that here really quickly. There's one at a time type project view here. So you can see the exclamation point next to draft invoice approvals. There's a process now where as a PM, I have the ability to see the draft that was just generated either in interactive or via batch billing. You have the ability here to do annotations or markups real time on the invoice. So the PM could come in, make some particular comments around why he or she might want to reject this. So you can see the approve, reject, reassign up here. But send that on through to accounting, so that accounting has then the ability to make either the adjustments, or if it's approved, you might come in here and just say, please, final bill. Thanks. These are internal comments between the biller and the PM. It's an open dialogue, so the biller may have sent a message saying, please approve these no later than the 7th or the 10th or the 15th. The PM comes in, he or she goes through and makes adjustments, and then at that point, approves or rejects, and you can see that notation here, which is going to allow you to push that through the system accordingly. Final bill it if it's approved, or if it's rejected. That's a great example where you might then run into something like an interactive billing. But before we get there, let's head back out to the main menu. Let's click on invoice approvals. This is more of a grid type function where as a PM, you can see multiple projects versus the screen we just left, which is one at a time, right? Obviously based on just that project's invoice. Some PMs prefer this, where you can now just run down the list and in the same way preview the invoice, approve or reject, make comments back to the billers. You can see that same list of comments out from here as well. So it's always nice to have options. PMs, and really, most workers in general prefer to have different avenues to make the types of changes or complete the responsibilities that they have organizationally. So this is certainly no different, whether it's one at a time or it's multiple projects. Something like invoice approvals will absolutely help streamline that process. And then just to take a quick look at interactive billing and run through the different labor items, you can highlight them and hold them if that's what the PM indicated. You could set them back to billing here really quickly. So it's all about automation and efficiency. If you want to write something off, you want to go ahead and transfer because it slipped through your multi-level approval, and now you want to go ahead and transfer this to another project. You have the ability to always see invoices previously done in perpetuity here. You can reissue them out to the contact at your client organization. You can void them. You can issue a credit memo. So that really gives you a lot of flexibility too as billers and as PMs through the entirety of this process. Get the invoices out as finals. You can then cash receipt them in the system. You can track them as we showed in that dashboard, that billing review dashboard, and really create the efficiency and effectiveness around project financials, around cash flow that you're looking for as an organization with a product like Vantagepoint. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Sarah for next steps here. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks so much, Paul. That was great. So we did have one question that came in during the demonstration, and it's, will Vantagepoint allow me to review invoices and approve them quickly? So this might have been asked prior to you kind of walking through this, but absolutely, there is a full invoice approval process. You'll be able to determine who's going to be setting those approvals, and you will be able to do your markups and your annotations directly within Vantagepoint and keep track of that communication back and forth. So it looks like that is about all the questions that we have. Before we officially conclude, we want to remind you that you will receive an on-demand recording of this webinar within the next 24 hours. Also, we'd appreciate it if you would go ahead and fill out the short survey that you'll see at the conclusion of the webinar as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and please visit deltek.com for more upcoming Deltek events. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.